Hi everybody, welcome to Charlottesville Creative Mornings. We are part of a global breakfast event series, which is currently in 244 cities, at least as of when I got this slide a week ago. There could be more, around the world. And all of these chapters hold these exact same breakfast events every month on a shared theme. This month's theme is Journey. And if you want to post about it on social media, you can use the CM Journey hashtag. No pressure, but it's on the slide. And I want to start off by thanking Adobe. So like I said, Creative Mornings is a global series, and just like our local partners that you'll hear about later help provide our coffee and pastries and all these nice things, Adobe helps keep global Creative Mornings running. And Adobe would like to make sure that you know about Adobe Express. Empowers you to create stunning social posts, videos, images, flyers, and more. It's free at adobe.com/express. Check it out. And thank you to Adobe for letting this exist. One of the global things you can participate in that does benefit from Adobe sponsorship are the Creative Mornings field trips. So we have our events every month, more or less. There's also events in the Shenandoah Valley. There's events in Richmond. But if you would rather just stay at home, Creative Mornings also offers field trips. And these are just Zoom events led by folks within the global Creative Mornings community. A month or two ago, a local artist led one and had people from all over the world dial in. So if you're looking for things to do, check out creativemornings.com/field trips. But like I said, I really want to thank our local partners, UVA Arts, New City Arts, and the Fralin Museum of Art at the University of Virginia. And they have a few events to shout out. There's a QR code. You can also Google Fralin, and all these things will show up pretty quickly. Also, New City Arts has two opportunities if you are an artist looking for financial support for a creative project. They are accepting applications for their fellowship, and you have today is the deadline to apply for Charlottesville Soup. Any artist who's selected gets an honorarium, but then if you are the winner of that year's Soup, you get a $3,000 grant, I think minimum, and that could go up if people donate more through the night. So apply today. If you are an artist, I think in probably a couple weeks, you can see opportunities to buy tickets if you would just like to attend. So keep an eye out for that. Also, thank you to our hosts, WTJU, for letting us use their stage. I cannot even off the cuff speak to all of the resources they provide to the community. Not only do they have two great radio stations, they also, I know, have podcasting studios available to the community, and a lot of recurring events in this space, both, I think, concerts at some frequency, and if you are a community event, like, say, a breakfast lecture series, they are happy to share the space for folks like us. So they're a great resource to our community. Thank you to WTJU. And more thanks to Ian and to Corbin for our videography and photography. If you ever miss a Creative Mornings, there's videos online, normally within the month. And so, or if this is your first one and you want to go back and see what you've missed, they're all online on our website. And thank you to our Creative Mornings Charlottesville organizing team for helping me put all of this together. And that's all our preamble. I'm going to introduce Sanjay as soon as I find the screen that his bio is on. Sanjay is an independent documentary and commercial photographer based in Charlottesville, Virginia, former photographer of UVA, as well as a fellow in democracy at the Karsh Institute for Democracy. These days, he's continuing his documentary work in addition to serving as the photographer for Dave Matthews Band and Public Enemy. In addition to his work in music, he has extensively covered issues surrounding race, equity, white supremacy, and representation across the Commonwealth and the nation for publications such as New York Times, Wall Street Journal, National Geographic, VQR, Politico, and others. His photography has also appeared in outlets such as the Washington Post, CNN, the LA Times, Architectural Digest, NPR, and USA Today. His photojournalism is also in the collections of museums across the country. Thank you, Sanjay. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so anyways, since Jeremy gave me absolutely no instructions, this is going to be all done in the music of Journey. I'm kidding. I'm not even going to, I had it in my notes to quote Journey, and I'm not going to quote Journey because I think Journey sucks, but personally. But I thought about doing the whole thing through Journey. I do have a Journey story, but I won't tell it today. It's not that exciting. It's tangential, Journey adjacent. Anyways, this is about, I'm a terrible public speaker, so bear with me, but this is going to be about sort of like faking it until you make it in sort of rock and roll, and my journey through faking it, because I'm still faking it. So, if you can't tell, well, I'll start here. My journey began in high school. Got my mom's old film camera. Really, really loved photography. If you can't tell, I'm brown, so first generation American. So going to school for photography or anything like that, completely off the table. Like, doctor, okay. You know, lawyer, okay. Gas station owner, that's been okay. But photographer, not okay. But here I am. I've taken exactly one photography class in my life, and that was in high school. So I'm deeply unqualified to be standing here in front of you talking about photography. And my high school photography teacher, like I said, Buffalo, he had photographed O.J. Simpson wearing the boots and the gloves he allegedly wore when he allegedly killed someone. He killed them. And so my photography teacher the year before went to trial, and the elder Kardashian, whose dad grilled him and called him a liar, and he never quite got over that. So my entire class was about the O.J. Simpson trial. And but that said, you know, this teacher, he did, besides educate me on the O.J. Simpson trial extensively, he showed me like developing a piece of paper in the darkroom, and it was magic, and I was sort of hooked to that. So, well, I didn't learn really anything from him. I did learn that I liked photography. So that was the sum total of my formal education in the field. And so this first thing I sort of learned later in life is, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I don't know how many of you do what you went to school for. I don't. And how many of you have turned a passion into a hobby, into a career? That's what I did. So I went to school for international relations and business. So I definitely am not using that. So that was the first journey. It doesn't really matter what you go to school for anything. Let me scroll down. But I got into photography because I learned in college that I didn't have a lot of money, but if you had a camera, you could go to any concert for free. And you got 2 tickets in order to turn around some photos. I was like, that seems like a pretty good idea. I like music. And so I started going to concerts to take photos for free. And that was a little bit of confidence in my thing. That's actually concert photography I learned. Later it was extremely hard. It was not easy. Like, I was pretty good at taking pictures of flowers or my cat or my girlfriend at the time, but not concerts. But, you know, a little fake confidence, you can kind of get into anything. I've completely distracted myself here. Let's see. Anyways, I've missed a whole story about the not knowing what you're going to do, not doing what you're in the field for. I also learned that those of you who studied something completely different and are in a creative field are usually much more interesting than people who studied whatever. No offense if you studied design and are a designer. But in Dave Matthews Band, our monitor engineer, the monitor engineer is the guy who does the in-ear monitors that the band hears. His assistant, not him, his assistant to the monitor engineer, Dwight Schrute joke. He was a rocket scientist. He actually made rockets that went into space, and now he fixes my headphones when they go wrong so I can hear the band. But he is much more interesting and much more capable because he had that whole other life experience. And so his name is Greg. Greg might come back in a later part of the story. So college, fumbled around with photography, and all that, but went to school for international relations and business, decided I was going to join the family business, which was banking. Yeah. But after college, perhaps because I did get in a big bike accident, and so I think I hit my head. I'm not sure. I wanted to stay in Buffalo, where I grew up. No offense, but Buffalo it's not happening. And browsing the old Craigslist, like one did back in the day, I found this photographer in Toronto, and he was a higher education photographer. He traveled to different schools, taking all the brochure photos that you would get when you took your SATs, and they bombard you with these schools that you've never heard of. And he lived in Toronto, and he needed someone in the United States to keep all his gear and avoid taxes and just do all of the terrible work for him. So I was like, oh, that seems like a pretty good deal, $250 a day, and I get to see the world, as he told me. The world turned out to be great metropolises like Abilene, Texas, Norma, Illinois, Defiance, Ohio, Shamokin Dam, Pennsylvania, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Those were the first 5 trips I took with him. Tell you, your first introduction to Texas should not be Abilene, Texas. Working at Abilene Christian University. I was like, you're all married? You're like 10 years old. What are you doing? They actually, as a side, had us set up a photo of students hanging out in the student lounge in the dorm, watching the, the 700 Club or whatever that show is. And I was like, no one watches this. They're like, yes, we actually watch this. But out of all of that, I got an education in actually how to be a better photographer. And all this time I was still taking music stuff when I was home. But I was finally getting paid to help in photography, which is kind of cool. Not getting paid for music yet. But, guilted into using my degree. I quit that after a few months, and I went into DC and did all sorts of government stuff. I think I also wanted to move out of my parents' house, because it's the thing, and move out of Buffalo. The love of Buffalo must have faded. But I never stopped taking photos. In fact, I moved pretty much right next to the 930 Club, and I learned that they too gave out 2 free tickets to shows if you took photos, which was pretty great. And so I started building up a portfolio and photographing things that were adjacent to my government work, building up a little bit of photojournalism here and there. But all the while when I was photographing things that were government related or at shows, I started asking people, like, how do you make a living from this? How do you earn money from this? And I soon learned that almost none of them did. And that was lifting a huge weight off my back when I'd see all these people at other shows and or on tour with a band, and they're like, yeah, this is like my side job. This is not where I don't make money, or this is, and I'm not saying photography is a poverty thing, but it kind of can be. So that was a huge weight off my back, learning that everybody had a side hustle, or everybody had a real job that they just didn't talk about as much because they weren't so passionate about it. They were teachers or whatever it was. And so, oh no, my notes. So that's the second lesson that I learned, is like the myth of a full-time artist is a modern myth, I think. And so I did some Googling. I just picked some random artists, and I will tell you about what they used to do. Andy Warhol started doing advertisements for shoes and layouts for department store windows. At least it was creative. Van Gogh was an art dealer, teacher, bookseller, and a failed preacher. And back in his day, preachers weren't even paid. He just failed at it. It wasn't even a job. They just kicked him out. They're like, you suck. And the best was Charles Bukowski. I'm sure some of you are familiar with his past, but his jobs were dishwasher, truck driver, loader, mail carrier, guard, gas station attendant, stockboy, warehouse worker, shipping clerk, post office clerk, parking lot attendant, Red Cross orderly, elevator operator, dog biscuit factory, slaughterhouse, cake and cookie factory, and hung posters in the subway. All of that, which makes for pretty interesting life experiences to write books. And so the life experiences we have outside of our art inform that. And so the myth of the full-time artist, if you see someone you admire that's doing what you want to do, ask them how they got there, what they're also doing. I do lots of work that isn't rock and roll, and it's fun and it's cool and it's interesting, but I don't think I'm going to post to social media too much about doing advertisements for with hospice patients or something that I do. I believe deeply in it, and it's great, but it's not like, doesn't bring the feels, really. So part 2 of that lesson is I started to look and I see Erin in the back, who I hired at UVA, and I've told her this many times. Look at your day job as the patron of your art. You know, you're there for 9 to 5. It's paying you for those hours. And what you do with that other time, you can do whatever you want. They're the patron of your art. And that helps reframe if you are sitting at a day job you absolutely detest, or don't detest, or just don't feel passionate about. It's the patron of your art. It's the patron of your creativity. Whether you're doing art or whatever it is. If your passion is running, it's the patron of your running. So eventually, in this journey of mine, a staff photographer job became available at a college in DC, and I applied. And I went with a little bit of feeling like I wasn't going to get it. I had a portrait of Barack Obama I took as when he was a senator, and I just said, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for you, which I was sort of sarcastic. And it worked, which was shocking. So for those keeping track, at this point in 10 years, money made by rock and roll, $0, but I was finally working in photography. And that's something I tell a lot of people getting into photography is specialize in one thing, become really good at that one thing or known as that one thing, and people will just automatically assume you can do other things. So if you like horses, be the horse photographer. If you like whatever, and they'll just assume, oh, if he can do that, he can probably do this other thing. And then you have to figure out how to do it. And for me, that was figuring out how to be a staff photographer at a college. I had a little bit of experience being that guy's assistant, but not really. So for the next 5 years, I worked at that college, took photos of the 930 Club at night, repeat, and took a job saw a job at UVA as their photographer, took it and applied. And out of 225 people, I got that job. So when I got it, I asked the lady who hired me, Sherry Winston, some of you might know her, she runs the Rotunda now, why me? How did I get that job? And it turned out my job in the government, which involved databases, technology, and a lot of data handling, were the one thing that set me apart from all the other people. It's not about the photography. It's about all the other things you can do. I call it like herding cats or whatever, but like they had a massive problem of organizing photos. And how did they get that organized? How did they get that reined in? And that's why they hired me. So going back to Greg, the assistant to the monitor engineer, his being a rocket scientist is why, you know, you'd look at him and be like, why are you the assistant to a guy pushing buttons? It's because we have an old Hammond organ. If it breaks, he knows how to actually work with vacuum tubes. How many of you have actually seen a vacuum tube in operation? Anyone? They're ancient, you know, or he'll know exactly how to trace down a fiber optic break in a line that runs all the way to the soundboard. Like, he has this knowledge that no one else has, and that's why Greg is so like vital. He's probably the most vital person other than the guy whose name is on the band. So anyways, I got that job at UVA, moved to Charlottesville. That's now 15 years in music photography. Total profit from music photography, 0, if we're keeping tallies. This is about faking it to make it, passion projects, all that, you know. So when I got to Charlottesville, I thought, you know, I seem to remember there was a band I used to like in high school that was from here, but I couldn't, of course, I was quickly reminded, everyone here has a Dave story. Everyone is like, you know, he worked at Miller's, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I did not have a Dave story. That's fine. But, you know, I didn't have a 930 Club here. There was the Jefferson, and I would do some shows there, but that was pretty locked down by some other people. I was like, how do I continue to do the music photos I like? I wasn't even thinking about it as a job, but I started asking around, and a coworker of mine, a videographer, introduced me to a guy named Fenton, and Fenton does Dave's Lights. And he was like, oh, you do video and photos? You can be useful to me. And I said, yeah, sure. So I started doing country music festivals with them, finally getting paid to do something music adjacent after 17 years. But what I learned from all of that, the lesson I learned is put out what you want, and I think that was one of the prompts, which probably people didn't see, but put out into the world what you want, and people will try to give it to you. And this is not some weird like manifestation crap into Joel Osteen shit. No, it's not any of that. But it's like, I think that one of the things that people love to do who are decent people, and you know, there's not decent people in the world, but if they see something, they're like, oh, you really want to, I don't know, do something, and I know the person who can help you do that, they'll introduce you. You still have to have the skills and, you know, the responsibility to back it up, but I think people will try to make that connection for you. And I learned that here through that. And since then, I've learned that if you just sort of like, I want to do this, someone will figure out how to help you make that happen. And like once I started getting more established in music, the Dead were doing their final show. They'll never do a final show. They're going to keep going forever, even after they're all dead. In Chicago, and in California, the Fare Thee Well things. And I was like, I want to be one of the photographers for that. And I kept telling people, I'm like, I want to do that. And eventually it did happen. And I was like, there's something to this. If you put it out with enough people that know people, they're like, I know a guy who'd be really good at that. And they're willing to cash in their favor for you if you're not going to embarrass them. And so I called that like sort of engineering your success, for lack of a better word. You can Greg your success, our engineer. So at this point, and this is a long and winding talk, and I apologize, I don't have any slides, but I just ran out of time and didn't feel that like doing slides. But I was working adjacent to people in DMB, but not with DMB, and then I had started doing DMB's video and all that, but I wasn't their photographer. Cue the concert for Charlottesville. I don't know if any of you went. Stevie Wonder came out with Dave at the end, and they did this whole speech, and they were holding hands. And at that point in my career, I was the camera guy for the band on the stage with the drummer. So I had a camera on my hip, and I was just hiding, and they were talking and talking and talking and talking some more. And so I was like, you know what, screw this. And so I put down the video camera, and I just snuck out behind them and took a couple pictures of Scott Stadium with Dave and Stevie holding hands. I was like, that's a pretty cool photo. I like that. So the next time I saw Dave, I had printed out 2 copies and framed them, one for him and one for Stevie. And you can probably guess where this is going. And he was like, you dumbass, he's blind. I was like, yeah, but it was funny. It was funny, and he remembered it. And it turned into a funny comment. I was like, I don't see disability, Dave. I'm sorry. I didn't see that coming. Insert Stevie Wonder blind jokes here. But, he appreciated the photo. And as far as I know, to this day, it's the only photo of him playing music hanging in his house, which is kind of cool. But shortly thereafter, I became the band's photographer. And so just sort of like putting yourself out there, what do you get? And this is not specific to him. This is specific to anyone you work with in any field. Like, what do you get the person who has everything, or what do you do to like make a connection with someone? And I didn't do that wanting to be the photographer. I was just like, this is a really cool photo. And if I was there with Stevie Wonder, I would want a photo too. And if Stevie was there with Dave, he would maybe want a photo if he could see it. We talked about making a Braille version or something. Like, it didn't really work. I tried like to hammer out the silhouette of it, but just greet people as other people and give them what you would want to receive, and some things kind of work out like that. And so now, if you're doing the math, I've lost track of the years. Almost 20 years later, I do make my living in music photography. And so I quit working for UVA. I became a fellow at Karsh, and now that has run its course after a year, and I work on my own, and the majority of my life is music, but it took a long time to get there. So it's, you build this castle and you can't live in it for years and years and years, but eventually you can. And so it's sort of what a singer friend of mine said, you have to, musicians don't get famous young unless you're like really weird, like Justin Bieber or something, or Billie Eilish, but most of them get famous in their 40s or whatever. You just have to keep it up past everyone quitting, everyone taking other jobs, having responsibilities, and I sort of think that that's important to remember. I still don't have any actual education in what I'm doing. I'm still faking it till I make it. But I've managed to achieve what I'm doing by just keeping at it, and I guess that's the point of this. You can sort of engineer your end result. You can't always say, I'm going to do this, but you can put yourself in the positions to have people help you get there, and work proximate to the success you want. Like if you actually look at the people who work at the MoMA and have worked there, excuse me, there's an amazing number of artists that are now shown there that worked there, taking coats, tickets, tours, whatever. They worked proximate to the success they wanted, and sort of try that if you want to do something. The second thing that I learned is, willingness to openly talk about money in the business side with my peers and those who came before me and after has been one of the most important parts of the development. Everyone shouldn't work against each other. They should work together. it's not a race to the bottom. It is a career, it is a field, it is a vocation. You deserve to be paid well for it. And I think that that's really important. So for music photographers, my friend and I put together this survey and spreadsheet, and there's eventually like thousands of submissions of what you get paid for what size venue, what act, and everyone, including myself, was able to use that to negotiate a pay raise, which was pretty great. So share information openly. There's plenty of work around. Nobody's trying to take it out from under you. You don't have to beat them to the bottom. You can charge what you think you're worth, and if you are worth it, people will pay. Third, the only reason I'm at where I am now is because people were generous with their time teaching me. Like I said, I have no formal education in this, but all along the way, people taught me. So it's my job to do that now for people coming up, and I think all of you, if you have people that inspired you, find someone younger and help them come up. I'm very pleased that one of my former photo interns at UVA is now more successful in music than I am, and that's great. That's the best compliment you can ever have, is when someone you helped teach is now more successful than you. And then the last one, I think, is they say don't meet your heroes, but absolutely do. There's a lot of, I can only speak to photography. There's a lot of photographers I admire, and I've met almost all of my heroes who are alive, and some of them turned out to not be that great of people. And that's fine. I still can admire and learn from them. I have one who has taken a shine to me, but he will randomly call me and tell me that trans people shouldn't be playing sports or something on a Sunday, and just call me and start ranting. And I'm like, I can't have this conversation with you. I don't want to have this conversation with you, but I've learned be better than them in how they are. Like, people admire them for their work, but if you're like a kind of shitty person underneath, no one's going to really like you. So, I think you can meet your heroes, and if they suck, you can learn more from them than if they're just as wonderful as you think they are. So, all that rambling nonsense to say, in conclusion, the more you put out in the world what you want, the better the chances of ending up there. I'm still trying to get to where I want to be, but I don't really know where that is necessarily. But knowing where you're going with things is exactly, sometimes not knowing where you're going is exactly where you're supposed to be. That is my rambling talk. There we go.
So,
sorry.
I think we have a few minutes for Q&A if you're down.
Yeah.
I'll just start. So I guess you were able to kind of call your shot with the Dead, say, I want to be there. It worked out. Is there, I don't know, an intention you want to put out into the room? Like, what's your next white whale to photo?
Oh, I would love to be Bruce Springsteen's tour photographer, but I think that's pretty buttoned up.
That's
but that's the only bucket list thing I can think of off the top of my head.
It's pretty good if you've narrowed it down to just one left.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question?
Yeah.
Those years of like not being where you wanted and not taking photos of what you wanted to do, how did you stray away from burnout? Like being like, I'm not taking pictures of what I wanted. What I'm taking pictures of isn't inspiring me.
Because I think I was partially lucky because I worked at a university, which is like a small city, and that there's a lot of things happening, and it might not be exactly what you want, but it can be close. Music is music, which is what I really love to photograph, but also someone reminded me once that, you're doing something close to what you want to do, and you could be waiting tables, but you get paid much finer to just take photos. So, it might not be what you want. You're still doing it. And then, going at night to photograph what you want, it wasn't a career, but I could do it as long as I had time, and so the burnout would happen probably in the day job more from being out late at night. But I'm not saying I didn't burn out, but I was at least appreciative of being proximate to what I wanted to do. And, I still, at 42, I'm not making a career entirely out of music. I do other things. I'm not sure I'll ever completely make 100% of my income out of music. I'll do other things, but that's okay too. You can take photos in one area and they can bleed over into the other. Sometimes advertising clients really like what I do with concert stuff that's kind of weird, and they're like, can you bring that motion into I did an ad for a lobster council. Could you bring some of the concert motion into lobster fishing? And I was like, The lobsters, they don't move so fast. But like that was the ask. Could you do that? And I was like, yeah, I'm on a boat with some lobsters. I can try. Yeah. So yeah, I guess like trying to interject a little bit of what you want into what you're actually doing is kind of fun too. Like, yeah.
So since making your creative passion into your mostly primary vocation, have you developed any other like random hobby, creative pursuits, taking care of ginkgo trees,
I probably should. I used to be into caving a lot before I had an injury, so that was one of them. I guess I'm trying to learn the drums. Stuart over there I have to have another lesson with him. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of time, unfortunately, to learn something new, but I would like to. Yeah.
Hopefully I won't get blacklisted by Adobe for asking this question. What do you see as the benefits and threats of AI in the industry in the coming years?
You're asking the question that I can see Meg over there. Meg is one of my friends who's a designer, loves AI. I don't touch AI, so I don't really necessarily know the benefit or the threat. I think, though, that the value that as photographers, we have, Corey has, whoever is a photographer, and I can't speak to any other industry because I'm not in it, is not necessarily the ability to take the picture, but it's to communicate the thought that you as the client want me to communicate, or the feeling or the emotion or the whatever you're trying to communicate. And AI, if you've ever asked it to generate something, I've only played a little bit, it doesn't quite do it. That doesn't quite communicate the thought that you want. You can type it out in English. I saw a picture the other day of a camping scene that was done by AI, but the fire was inside the tent. It can't quite get it there. So for me, you can be a great photographer, but if you can't communicate and organize and corral the cats and do all the things that you need to do, it's not going to be successful. And AI can't do all that for you. And so I think it'll be a threat to people who do stock photography. It'll be a threat to companies who are too cheap, already would be too cheap to hire somebody, so they're not going to use you. Or it'll be a threat. I think it's an existential threat to democracy and news. I saw a video yesterday that looked somewhat realistic of Trump licking Elon Musk's feet. Don't ask me how that appeared in my algorithm, but it did. And I was like, this looks kind of realistic. I don't doubt that this might have happened. But it's a threat to democracy and journalism, but I don't know if it's a threat to the creative industry. I think you just have to highlight why a real human is valuable and not AI. Yeah, Dan.
Sanjay, you mentioned about ability to dive in and learn new things. And I would say as another photographer, a big part of your reputation was totally raising the bar with aerial work and UAVs, or the whole aspect of jumping in. And are you missing that side of things where you really change the whole landscape with your aerial work around these parts?
I still do drone stuff from time to time. I do it more for fun now, and if you look on my website, you can find this picture of, I could probably pull it up and show you all later, the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond that had the graffiti from above, and I just framed it just so you could see the outline of the pedestal and the horse straight from above. So I try to use it more as like art now than doing it just as here's another pretty picture of the rotunda. Mm-hmm. But that's Erin's job now. She just got her drone license. She's the new UVA photographer person. But I don't really miss it too much because I still do it from time to time. But it was fun to be the first person to photograph UVA with a drone, really, and sort of be there for the rise of that technology.
Is there much you miss out of the UVA decade? Or
I miss the people and the learning from the different faculty I would see, and just learning. Everyone there is much smarter than me. I never would have gotten into UVA, so it was always fun getting an education from them on all different things, and I miss that part.
Hi, I'm don't know if I actually have my question formulated correctly, but I'm making an observation that I wasn't educated in this field, but are successful with your photography. How much do you credit, so the self-study, which I am myself and highly value, like the balance between trusting your own intuition and just getting the experience and actually having an incredible amount of discipline to self-educate yourself in a very technical field, and you deciding who your mentors are and how much time you're going to spend doing something. Like what personality type, I guess, do you consider, do you think, what is the question?
Probably partially obsessive compulsive, I'm guessing. Probably.
Okay.
You know, I think it was sort of the perfect storm. The last job I had doing government stuff, I really didn't like. And so I would spend a lot of time finding the end of the internet on photography.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say that was probably great for my employer. But that was the discipline. It was more interesting to me than what the other stuff I was doing. You know, I'm not saying didn't have a life outside of it, but like there was, to learn this photography stuff and experiment with it was more interesting to me than the other stuff. So just the natural weight of it, you know, things flow downhill. I was just going to go to that, you know.
You need to have somewhere to channel that energy, that
Yeah.
curiosity.
There was no energy being channeled at work.
Gotcha.
So I had to channel it somehow. I just was not passionate about what I was doing. Yeah.
How much in the 17 years when you weren't making money doing music photography, and even now, were you thinking about your personal brand? And did you have to do you have to protect the music photographer and be known as a music photographer from maybe the commercial work that you kind of do for money, but you don't necessarily, that's not what you're trying to put out in the world. So how much are you thinking about, you know, that personal brand and curating it for potential clients?
That's a great question. I don't think I have a personal brand, which is kind of funny. I chose this talk about music because, you know, I talked about the statues a lot during my fellowship, and the commercial work I couldn't quite figure out like a coherent thing around. But, you know, everyone would tell me, you have to pick one. You have to be the music guy, the celebrity portraiture guy, or you have to be the commercial one or the photojournalist. And I have yet to pick one, which is kind of weird. You know, the stuff that's in museums is all photojournalism stuff that the lines don't even merge between that and the music stuff. My gallery is not interested in my music stuff. They don't want it, they don't want to see it, they don't want to hear about it. And, you know, the celebrity portraiture stuff, they don't really care about the musicians. They're like, it's completely different. And so somehow I have managed to not specify, and I think that's been my greatest strength, because different people know me for different things, but I haven't come up with a brand. And I keep thinking about like redoing my website some way, but it's just this kind of beautiful cluster of just whatever, and it's working, and maybe I should, but yeah, I haven't thought about that. And partially because, going back to what I said about like, what do you really do to make a living to people? You know, now I make all my money through photography, but like, I want to be honest that if you go to my website, you're going to see higher ed marketing photography, which is like, I'm looking at my watch because I have to go to do one of those shortly. You're going to see that. You're going to see like doctor's office portraits or things that I've done. And you're also going to see like Flavor Flav riding a micro horse holding a pistol in the air. You're going to see all of this weird stuff, but that's what you're going to see. And that's fine because I'm honest about what I do. And I probably should be better with a brand, but maybe I'm just too old and not... I'm not too in on the personal brand thing.
And I think let's maybe one last question.
Corey.
What's the like shot that you're chasing? Like you had it in your head for a long time. And you're like, I just want like, I know you already have Flavor Flav on a micro horse with a pistol, but like, what's the shot that you're like, man, I want that?
I don't know who it would be, but I'm really a fan. If you look at my stuff, of a lot of symmetry in photography. And I would probably go into music. Like DMB is a very asymmetrical band. They're not centered on the stage, and there's not a whole lot of movement. But like, I think of iconic music venues like Madison Square Garden or the Forum in LA that have like distinctive architecture. I really want to get a shot. And there's a really good one someone got in the 60s of Elton John at a piano, like centered, I think, at Dodger Stadium. some sort of reverse shot with someone like jumping or doing something like Freddie Mercury style in like the LA Forum, which maybe at the end of the month I will get. Something like that, some really like iconic symmetrical concert shot. I don't know who, but that's sort of what I'm looking. That's what I'm chasing at the moment.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for indulging me.